My name is Lena Carter. I'm 29, and for a long time I believed I was hard to love. Ethan made sure of that. We met in a coffee shop in Seattle, one of those gray sky mornings when everything smells like rain and espresso. I was hunched over my laptop finishing a presentation for an architecture firm, and he asked if the seat next to me was taken. He had that soft-spoken confidence people instantly trust. A neat beard, a voice like a slow melody, and the kind of smile that promised you safety. I should have known better than to trust anyone who feels too safe too soon. Back then, though, I was still healing from my mother's death and the breakup of a 5-year relationship. I was lonely. So when Ethan said, "You look like someone who works too hard to prove something," I laughed instead of running. The first months were intoxicating. He cooked for me, remembered the smallest details, like how I hated cinnamon in coffee but loved it on toast. He'd text me little notes during the day. "Don't forget to breathe, superstar." I didn't realize those texts were seeds, small acts of control disguised as care. By month 6, he'd moved into my apartment temporarily after his lease fell through. He said it'd be easier for both of us, less rent, more time together. I said yes because love is supposed to be about compromise, right? Then the criticisms began. "You overthink everything, Lena. You're too emotional. You remember things that didn't happen." They started as whispers during arguments, then became declarations. Once, when I confronted him about texting his ex at midnight, he laughed and said, "You're imagining things again. You need help, babe." That night, I sat in the bathroom staring at my reflection. My cheeks were blotchy from crying, and my hair stuck to my face. For the first time, I wondered if maybe he was right, maybe something was wrong with me. It's scary how easily you can start believing someone else's version of you. The final crack came at a dinner party with his coworkers. Ethan was trying to impress his new manager, so I wore a red dress he said he liked. I smiled, made conversation, tried to be the supportive girlfriend. But halfway through dessert, I noticed the way they looked at me, like I was something fragile, unpredictable. Later, I found out why. He told them I'd been in therapy for unstable moods. He told them I'd once thrown a plate at him. None of it was true. I'd never even raised my voice in front of those people. But they believed him, because he told the story first. That night, in the car, I whispered, "Why would you say that about me?" He grinned, not even trying to deny it. "Relax, Lena. It was just a joke. They know you're sensitive. Don't make a scene." The words "don't make a scene" echoed in my chest like a command. A month later, he moved out, said he needed space to figure himself out. I cried, begged, wrote long texts he never answered. Then one morning, I saw his Instagram. Him with a new girl, smiling in that same red dress I'd worn. Caption: "Finally peace." Peace. The audacity. The weeks that followed were a blur of panic and humiliation. Friends stopped calling. My boss asked gently if I was okay. Apparently Ethan had told people I'd had a breakdown. The story spread faster than I could defend myself. I deleted social media, stopped going to my favorite cafe, avoided eye contact with neighbors. I remember sitting in my apartment one night, surrounded by silence and empty wine bottles, whispering to myself, "Maybe I am crazy." Then something inside me snapped. No, not snapped, shifted. I realized I'd handed Ethan the pen and let him write my story. That night, I decided to take it back. It started small. I went to therapy not because he was right, but because I needed someone unbiased to help me rebuild my sense of reality. My therapist, Dr. Klein, told me, "Gaslighters rewrite history to keep you disoriented. The fact that you're questioning your sanity means you still have it." That line became my anchor. I journaled every day, recording memories, dates, what was said and done. The more I wrote, the clearer the fog lifted. I found evidence of my own strength, emails, messages, projects I'd let at work while he claimed I was too unstable to focus. By spring, I was functioning again, still hurting but functioning. Then, almost a year later, the universe decided to hand me a plot twist. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in my office reviewing blueprints when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The email preview read, Reference request for Ethan Miller. For a second, I thought it was a prank. Then I opened it. It was from Jordan West, director at Raven Dynamics, a sustainability architecture firm in Portland. Apparently, Ethan had applied for a senior design position and had listed me as a professional reference. I actually laughed out loud. The audacity was cosmic. I read the email 3 times, half expecting hidden cameras. My coworker Jenna peeked over and asked why I was grinning like I'd just won the lottery. I told her, "Oh, just karma sending me an invitation." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Ethan's smug face, remembering how he'd made me question my mind, my worth, my truth. I thought about ignoring the email. I thought about writing back something polite, detached, professional. But then I thought about every time he'd said, "No one will ever believe you." Maybe it was time someone did. I didn't rush my response. Instead, I spent days drafting it like an architect designs a house, measured, precise, with hidden steel beneath the surface. I wasn't going to lie. I wasn't going to curse him out or stoop to his level. I was going to build my truth, brick by brick, until it stood taller than his lies. But before I sent it, I wanted to know who this Jordan West really was. A quick search showed he was new in the company, known for valuing honesty and emotional intelligence in leadership hires. In interviews, he talked about toxic management and psychological safety at work. The irony was almost poetic. As I sipped my wine and stared at the blinking cursor, I whispered, "All right, Ethan. You wanted a reference? Let's build one you'll never forget." I must have stared at that blinking cursor for an hour, replaying every lie Ethan had told about me. Then I started typing. To Mr. Jordan West. Thank you for reaching out regarding Ethan Miller's application. I worked alongside him for 2 years on residential sustainability projects at Archer Design Group, where we shared both professional and personal overlap. You asked for an honest assessment of his professional integrity, communication, and teamwork. I'll answer as clearly as I can. I stopped, hands trembling. Not from fear, but from the rush that comes when you finally reclaim power. I wasn't out to destroy Ethan. I was out to tell the truth. The next lines flowed like confession and justice mixed together. Ethan is talented and charismatic, often persuasive in meetings and confident with clients. However, his leadership style sometimes relies on manipulation rather than collaboration. He's highly protective of his image, occasionally at the expense of others' credibility. I encourage any future employer to evaluate not only his portfolio, but also his ability to foster a psychologically safe team environment. No lies. No exaggeration. Just carefully chosen truth. I reread it 5 times. It was factual, restrained, and still carried the weight of everything he'd done to me. But something was missing, the heartbeat. The part that would make Jordan stop and think. So I added one more paragraph. On a personal note, I learned from my experience with Ethan the importance of emotional honesty in the workplace. Words hold power, they can build or break people. I'm confident you'll see his technical abilities. I just hope you also look for the humility that turns skill into trust. That was it. My mic drop moment wrapped in professionalism. I signed it, attached my contact info, and saved the draft. Then I didn't send it. Not yet. Because part of me still feared him. Gaslighters leave you with phantom guilt. You keep asking yourself, am I being too harsh? Am I crazy again? That night, I walked around my apartment in circles. My cat, June, followed me like a tiny therapist. The city lights flickered through the blinds, painting stripes across my living room wall. I opened a bottle of Pinot and whispered to myself, "You owe him nothing." I finally hit send at 1:47 a.m. For the first time in 2 years, I slept through the night. The next morning, I woke up lighter. My body felt foreign without the usual knot in my stomach. I made coffee, turned on some Phoebe Bridgers, and tried not to obsess. By noon, an email arrived. "Thank you, Lena, for your candid response. Your insights were valuable. Would you be open to a short phone call?" My heart stuttered. A phone call? I hesitated, then typed yes, of course. At 3 p.m., my phone rang. "Hi, Lena. This is Jordan West," a calm, deep voice said. I just wanted to thank you personally. Your letter stood out. It was thoughtful, professional, and refreshingly honest. I exhaled. Thank you for saying that. He continued, I have to ask, you mentioned psychological safety. That's something we're serious about here. Without prying, was that drawn from experience working with Ethan? The question was gentle, but I felt the weight behind it. I paused. Let's just say I learned that charm isn't the same as integrity. And sometimes, people build their reputations by tearing down others. Jordan was silent for a beat. Then, understood. That aligns with some feedback we've heard. He didn't elaborate, and he didn't have to. I could feel it. Ethan's mask was cracking. We ended the call cordially. He thanked me again, said they'd be in touch if they needed clarification. I hung up, heart racing. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, I got another email from Jordan again. We decided not to move forward with Ethan Miller's application. Your feedback helped us make an informed decision. Thank you again for your integrity. I read that line 10 times. Then I laughed, loud, real, body-shaking laughter that scared June off the couch. I wasn't celebrating his failure. I was celebrating my freedom. He hadn't just lost a job, he'd lost control of the story. But karma wasn't done yet. 2 days later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number with a familiar area code. I ignored it. It rang again. Then a text appeared. You couldn't just let it go, huh? Ethan. I stared at the screen, pulse quickening. I hadn't heard from him in over a year. Another text followed. You always have to play the victim. You ruined a major opportunity for me. Hope you're happy, Miss Unstable. The old fear clawed at me, but it didn't win. I typed back. All I did was tell the truth, Ethan. If the truth ruins your opportunities, that's not on me. Then I blocked him. That simple act felt like closing a door I'd been holding open out of habit. Over the next few weeks, small victories piled up. My performance at work improved. I was chosen to lead a new design project for a women's community center, a place meant to empower survivors of emotional abuse. I hadn't even mentioned my past to the board, but somehow the universe aligned that way. During one of our planning sessions, I told the team, architecture isn't just about walls and windows, it's about spaces that make people feel safe again. As I said it, I realized I was talking about myself too. I was building my safety from the ground up. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. One afternoon, as I was packing up my laptop, my boss poked her head into my office. You have a visitor, she said, eyes wide. Ethan was in the lobby. My stomach dropped. For a moment, the air felt thick again, like I was back in that marble-cold bathroom whispering apologies I didn't know. I walked out slowly. He stood near the glass doors, holding a manila envelope. His once perfect posture slouched, and there were shadows under his eyes. Lena, he started, voice lower than I remembered. Can we talk? Every instinct screamed no. But curiosity, the same dangerous thing that made me fall for him, held me still. 2 minutes, I said. He swallowed. I don't know what you told them, but they rescinded the offer. Jordan said they'd gotten concerning feedback. I can't get another interview now. My reputation. I cut him off. You built your reputation on lies. Maybe it's time it met the truth. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. I wasn't the woman who begged him to love her anymore. You're enjoying this, he accused. I shook my head. No. I'm learning from it. There's a difference. He opened the envelope, pulled out a printed version of my email, highlighted, annotated. You could have ruined me, but you didn't. You could have said worse. That's because I'm not you, I said. He exhaled, eyes softening with something almost like shame. Maybe you were right about me. I said simply and walked away. When I stepped back into the elevator, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but release. I didn't owe him anger anymore. I didn't owe him anything. That night, I went for a walk along the waterfront. The Seattle air was cool, salted by the bay. I sat on a bench, watching the ferries move across the dark water, and thought about how justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like peace arriving quietly after years of chaos. Still, I couldn't help but smile when I thought of that email chain, me reclaiming the story he'd stolen. I whispered to the water, "Here's to being crazy enough to believe I deserved better." June purred against my leg when I got home, as if seconding the toast. In the weeks that followed, people started coming back into my life. Friends who'd believed his lies reached out to apologize. My best friend Mara said, "I should have known better. You were never unstable. You were just trying to survive him." I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved the relief. Healing, I learned, isn't linear. Some nights, I still dreamt of the gaslight glow in our old apartment, of his voice twisting my memories. But I'd wake up, see the sunlight cutting through my curtains, and remind myself, "You're safe. You're free. You're real." Months later, I got one last surprise. An email popped up from Jordan West again. "Hi Lena, I wanted to reach out personally. We're expanding our design team and would love to discuss a collaboration. Your professionalism left an impression on me. If you're open, let's talk." I stared at the screen, grinning. The man who'd heard my truth now wanted to work with me. That was the universe's applause. I didn't tell anyone, but I printed that first email, the one where Ethan's boss asked for my reference, and framed it. It hangs above my desk now, a quiet reminder that sometimes the best revenge is simply being believed. When Jordan's email landed in my inbox, I reread it at least 10 times. "We're expanding our design team and would love to discuss a collaboration." It felt surreal. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was validation. The same company that had rejected Ethan now wanted me. I sat there at my kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me, staring at the glowing screen. June purred from the windowsill as if she could sense the shift, the universe quietly redrawing the power lines. I typed back carefully, keeping it professional but warm. "Thank you, Jordan. I'd be happy to discuss it. When would be a good time for a call?" He replied within minutes. "Tomorrow at 10 a.m., if that works for you." And Lena, I'm genuinely looking forward to it. I smiled, a small, private kind of smile. Not because of the compliment, but because I finally felt seen for who I was, not the woman Ethan painted, not the version of me that had to defend her sanity, but the one who'd survived. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and opened my laptop to review my portfolio. Every blueprint, every 3D render, every client testimonial, they all carried the fingerprints of someone who refused to stay small. By 10 a.m., I was ready. Jordan's voice came through the line calm and steady, the kind of tone that instantly sets you at ease. "Morning, Lena. How are you?" "Nervous," I admitted, laughing softly. "Good. That means you care." He asked about my design philosophy, my experience with community-based architecture, and the project I'd led after Ethan left. I told him about the Harbor House, a transitional housing project I designed for women leaving abusive relationships, how the structure used light, privacy, and openness to rebuild safety. Jordan was silent for a moment. Then he said, "That's powerful. You don't just build spaces, you build healing." No one had ever described my work like that. I felt my throat tighten. That's what I try to do. We talked for almost an hour, not just about design, but about integrity, empathy, and how architecture can shape behavior. When the call ended, he said, "We'll send over a collaboration proposal. I think this is going to be the start of something meaningful." When I hung up, I exhaled. Not relief, expansion. Within a week, the contract arrived. Raven Dynamics wanted me to consult on a green redevelopment project in Portland, restoring an old textile factory into a wellness and innovation hub. It was ambitious, sustainable, and deeply human-centered, everything I dreamed of working on. I signed it that same night. When I told Mara, she screamed into the phone, "Lena, do you realize what this means?" I laughed. "Yeah. The company that dumped Ethan wants to work with me. Feels poetic." She grinned through the line. "Poetic? Girl, it's divine justice wearing a hard hat." By the time I arrived in Portland for the kickoff meeting, I'd already seen my name printed on the project brief, lead design consultant, Lena Carter. The sight of it made something in me settle, like a puzzle piece finally snapping into place. Jordan met me in the lobby, tall, late 30s, kind eyes, flannel shirt under a tailored jacket. Not the stiff corporate type I'd imagined. "Lena," he said with a genuine smile, shaking my hand. "Glad you made it." The office had high ceilings, exposed brick, and the faint smell of cedar. Minimalist but warm, the kind of space that said we care about ideas here. As we walked through the studio, he introduced me to his team. "Everyone, this is Lena Carter. She's joining us on the Portland Wellness Hub." I caught a few familiar names on the whiteboard: sustainability engineers, interior designers, brand consultants. But one name froze me mid-step. E. Miller. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. No, it couldn't be. Jordan noticed my pause. "Oh, that's Evan Miller, one of our landscape designers. Any relation to the Ethan Miller you mentioned?" I forced a smile. Thankfully, no. Inside, my heart thudded. For a split second, I thought fate was playing a cruel joke, but no, this was just another reminder that the world is full of Millers. Ethan wasn't special anymore. And somehow, that realization felt like another small victory. The next few months were a blur of design sessions, site visits, and late-night brainstorming over takeout. I felt alive again, respected, trusted, heard. Jordan became both mentor and friend. He had this quiet way of challenging my ideas without making me feel small. Sometimes, during lunch breaks, we talk about leadership styles and how companies fail when they reward charisma over character. One afternoon, as we walked through the construction site, he said, "You know, that reference letter you wrote, it taught me something about discernment. You didn't tear him down, but you still told the truth. That's rare." I smiled. I used to think being honest would make me seem bitter. But now I think it's the only way to be free. He nodded. "Truth is the cleanest form of revenge, isn't it?" I laughed. Exactly. By winter, the project made headlines in local media. Raven Dynamics launches Portland's first emotional wellness architecture hub. The article quoted me directly. "Design can heal what manipulation destroys." When I saw those words printed online, I froze. Because 2 years earlier, Ethan had told me, "You're not cut out for leadership, Lena. You're too emotional for this field." And now my so-called emotions were literally headlining a national design piece. Mara texted me a screenshot with one line. "Guess who's eating humble pie tonight?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to. But later that evening, curiosity got the better of me. I opened LinkedIn and searched Ethan Miller. His profile was still there, but something had changed. His headline now read freelance consultant instead of senior design lead. His work history ended abruptly 3 months earlier. No new projects. No endorsements. Just a string of vague motivational posts about resilience after betrayal. I stared at the screen for a long minute, not gloating, just absorbing the symmetry of it all. He had tried to erase me. Now life was erasing him. In early March, Jordan invited me to present at a leadership workshop hosted by the company, Women in Sustainable Design. I almost said no. Public speaking still terrified me. But he insisted, "People need to hear your story, not the details, just the message." So I did it. Standing at the podium in front of 100 faces, I told them. Someone once told me I was too emotional to be taken seriously. That emotions made me unstable. But here's what I've learned. Emotion isn't weakness. It's data. It's the proof we care. And caring is what keeps us human in a world that rewards indifference. Applause thundered through the room. Some women were tearing up. I saw Mara in the front row mouthing, "That's my girl." When I stepped down, Jordan pulled me aside and said quietly, "That was brave." I smiled. It was overdue. After the event, we all went out for drinks. It was one of those crisp, chilly nights where the city feels alive. Someone ordered champagne to celebrate the project's milestone. Glasses clinked, laughter spilled, and I found myself laughing too, not the polite kind, but the kind that starts deep in your chest and surprises you with how genuine it feels. Halfway through the evening, Jordan leaned closer. "You've rebuilt everything he tried to break." I looked at him, eyes soft. "Not everything. Some pieces I left broken on purpose. They remind me where I came from." He nodded like he understood. Then they're part of your foundation now. The poetic revenge wasn't in destroying Ethan. It was in becoming untouchable by his lies. Because every success, every quote, every award, they whispered the same truth he'd tried to silence. She was never crazy. She was right. A few months later, Mara texted me out of the blue. You're not going to believe this, but Ethan's applying for a junior role at a firm my cousin works at in Chicago. Small world, huh? I laughed. The universe really loves reruns. She replied, you should warn them. But I didn't. I'd already told my truth once. That was enough. By the time spring came, the Portland project was complete. During the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I stood beside Jordan as the mayor gave a short speech about innovation meeting empathy. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, and I felt something close to peace. Not triumph, just stillness. When it was my turn to speak, I said, we don't always get to rewrite the stories others tell about us. But we can outlive them, outgrow them, and outshine them. The crowd applauded, but I wasn't speaking to them. I was speaking to the ghost of the girl who once begged a man to believe her. She finally believed herself. That night, I stood alone in the finished atrium. Glass ceiling, gentle lighting, the hum of new beginnings. My reflection shimmered faintly on the polished floor. I whispered, you did it. And for once, the voice in my head didn't argue back. I didn't realize how much strength looked like calm until the day I stopped checking Ethan's social media. For months, I had this obsessive routine: wake up, make coffee, scroll through his LinkedIn or Instagram to see what conference he was bragging about next. He posted selfies with his new girlfriend, Allison, that perfectly polished marketing smile, same blonde hair he used to say was his type. Sometimes, I'd catch a flicker of bitterness in myself, wondering if she knew what kind of liar he was. But by that spring, my mornings looked different. I was meeting clients, walking through job sites with Jordan, and sketching floor plans with deadlines that kept me grounded. My phone stopped being a weapon. My silence was starting to sound like peace. Then the universe decided to make things interesting. One Thursday afternoon, Jordan walked into my office holding a glossy portfolio. He looked unusually amused. You're not going to believe this, he said, placing the folder on my desk. I raised an eyebrow. What's that? New project proposal from a firm in Seattle. They're bidding for collaboration on the Green River complex. Okay, and he smirked. You might recognize their lead designer. I flipped the first page. And there it was, Ethan Marshall, senior design consultant, Weston and Parks Architecture. My stomach dropped, not out of fear this time, but disbelief. The man who once told me I'd never work in this industry again was now trying to collaborate with my firm on a multi-million-dollar project. Oh, this is too good, Jordan muttered, leaning back in his chair. Should I reject it, or let you have some fun? For a moment, I said nothing. My pulse was steady in that eerie, controlled way you get before doing something you'll remember forever. No, I said quietly. Let's hear them out. Jordan raised an eyebrow. You're sure? Absolutely. Let's keep it professional. The next week, we sat in the conference room, the big glass windows framing the skyline. Jordan and I were reviewing blueprints when I heard the door open. And then, that familiar voice, too smooth, too self-assured. Hey, I hope we're not late. I looked up. Ethan stood there in a tailored suit, a forced smile on his lips. The color drained from his face when he saw me. His new boss, a woman named Margaret, walked beside him, extending her hand warmly. Hi. You must be Lena Collins, she said. I've heard great things about you. We're excited about this partnership. I shook her hand with a practiced smile. Likewise. Ethan's eyes darted between us, his composure cracking. He mumbled something about not realizing we'd be working with his firm, and Margaret laughed it off, completely unaware of the history simmering under the polished table. During the presentation, he fumbled twice. His ideas, once the only thing I admired about him, suddenly seemed hollow. Every time he glanced at me, I met his eyes without flinching. I could feel Jordan's quiet amusement beside me. After the meeting, as everyone packed up, Margaret turned to me. Lena, could you stay behind for a moment? I actually wanted to talk to you privately. Ethan froze. Oh, I'll wait outside. No need, Margaret said with a polite smile. You can go ahead, Ethan. He hesitated but left, his jaw tight. When the door closed, Margaret's friendly tone softened into something more curious. I know this might sound odd, she said carefully, but before I joined Weston and Parks, I heard a few rumors about your previous collaboration with Ethan. You don't have to answer, of course, but would you be comfortable giving me an honest professional reference? It took me a second to process what she was asking. A reference. For him. There was something poetic in that, like fate had handed me the microphone at the end of a long, painful song. I smiled faintly. Sure, I said. You want the truth, right? Margaret nodded. So I told her. Not a word of exaggeration, not a hint of pettiness. Just the truth. I explained how he'd taken credit for my designs, how his poor communication had cost us a client, how he'd handled stress by lashing out and spreading false rumors. I spoke calmly, factually, the way you do when you've finally stopped caring whether someone believes you, because you know the truth has its own gravity. By the end, Margaret looked thoughtful. Thank you for your honesty, Lena. That's enlightening. When she left, I sat alone in the conference room for a long moment. The city outside looked almost cinematic, glass towers catching the late afternoon light, traffic humming like background music. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to cry. I didn't even feel angry. I felt vindicated. Quietly, powerfully. A few weeks later, news started circulating through the industry grapevine. Weston and Parks had pulled Ethan off the Green River project. Rumor had it Margaret had reviewed his past work and found inconsistencies, missing files, questionable leadership calls, even client complaints. Jordan tried to hide his smirk when he told me. So, Karma's got a decent work ethic after all. I laughed, a real, unforced laugh that surprised even me. But what surprised me more was how little I cared about him anymore. His downfall wasn't my victory. It was just balance. What mattered was how my own world was expanding. Jordan and I presented our new designs for Green River that summer. The city council loved them. We were featured in a regional architecture magazine, and my inbox overflowed with new opportunities. The firm doubled its client base. At the launch event, surrounded by models, renderings, and proud colleagues, I caught myself thinking of the girl I used to be, the one sitting on her apartment floor, crying into coffee, believing a man's opinion defined her worth. If she could see me now, she'd barely recognize herself. A few months later, I got an unexpected email. Subject: apology, if that still means anything. It was from Ethan. I stared at it for a while before opening it. The message was long, rambling, the kind of apology that tries to sound noble but bleeds guilt between the lines. He admitted he'd lied about me being unstable to protect his job after the breakup. Said he'd been immature, that I didn't deserve that. He wrote that losing his reputation had been a wake-up call. At the end, he added, I know I can't undo what I did, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry. For everything. For a minute, I sat there, reading it over and over. Once, I would have crafted a furious reply, something sharp and satisfying. But that version of me no longer needed to be heard. Instead, I wrote back, I accept your apology. I hope you learn from it. Then I hit send and closed the laptop. No fireworks. No triumphant music. Just peace, that quiet, steady peace that comes from realizing the person who hurt you no longer controls your story. That night, I met Jordan and a few friends for dinner. We toasted to new projects, new beginnings. When someone brought up Karma again, I smiled but said nothing. Because by then, I knew the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming untouchable. The restaurant lights reflected off the window, and I caught my own reflection, older, wiser, unshaken. I thought of everything I'd lost because of Ethan's lies, and everything I'd gained because I chose not to let them define me. And for the first time in a long, long while, I finally felt like I'd won. By the end of that year, my life had shifted in ways I couldn't have imagined. The Green River Project wasn't just another line on my resume, it became a symbol. People in the architecture community started referring to it as the comeback. The girl who was supposedly too emotional, too unstable, had designed one of the most talked-about sustainable complexes in the Pacific Northwest. I'd see my name in trade magazines, next to words like visionary and resilient leader. Every time, it felt surreal. There was a time when I couldn't even look in a mirror without hearing Ethan's voice whispering that I'd ruin my career. Now, my voice was the one being quoted in articles about innovation and perseverance. Jordan once joked, "If this keeps up, you'll need security at your keynote speeches." I laughed. I'd settle for a day off. But deep down, there was pride, the kind that comes from rebuilding yourself piece by piece with no one's permission. The turning point came the following spring when I got an invitation to speak at an Industry Women in Design conference in Los Angeles. The theme was integrity and influence in modern architecture. When I first read it, I almost laughed at the irony. If someone had told me 2 years earlier that I'd be giving a talk about integrity after being labeled unstable, I'd have rolled my eyes. But now it felt like the most fitting full circle. I spent weeks preparing. My talk wasn't just about buildings, it was about people, the unseen structures we build inside ourselves after betrayal. The night before the event, I stood by my hotel window overlooking downtown LA, the skyline glittering like possibility itself. I thought about how far I'd come and how little of that journey had anything to do with Ethan anymore. Or so I thought. The next morning, I walked into the conference hall, nerves buzzing under my blazer. It was a sea of faces, designers, entrepreneurs, students. Somewhere in the crowd, cameras clicked. Halfway through the lineup, one of the coordinators approached me backstage. "Lena? You'll be on right after the Weston and Parks panel. They're presenting on sustainable urban integration." I froze. "Wait, Weston and Parks? As in?" "Yeah," she said cheerfully. "Their lead consultant, Ethan Marshall, is speaking." For a second, all the air left my body. Out of thousands of conferences, it had to be this one. I peeked through the curtain, and there he was, standing under the spotlight, looking composed but thinner, like life had taken a few bites out of his confidence. He was gesturing toward a slideshow, talking about environmental empathy, a term he'd probably lifted from someone else. And then something strange happened. I didn't feel anxious. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. Watching him up there, selling the same kind of hollow charm that once fooled me, I realized I had already won. Quietly, thoroughly, completely. When it was my turn, I stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, the applause warm. "Good morning," I began. "My name is Lena Collins, and I want to talk about what integrity looks like when no one's watching." The room went silent. I could see heads tilt, pens hover above notepads. I told them about my early years, the collaborations, the projects, and yes, the mistakes. But I also spoke about something most people in our field avoid, how personal betrayal can bleed into professional identity, how easily a rumor, a whisper, a single malicious lie can fracture a woman's credibility. I didn't say Ethan's name. I didn't need to. I once believed that surviving betrayal meant proving everyone wrong. I said, my voice steady. But it turns out real survival isn't about proving anything. It's about knowing your truth, holding onto it even when someone tries to rewrite your story. The applause at the end wasn't loud, it was long. The kind that fills a room like gratitude instead of noise. Afterward, dozens of women came up to me, designers, students, even CEOs, thanking me for saying what they'd never dared to say out loud. "You made me feel seen," one of them said, her voice trembling. That was the moment I realized my revenge wasn't Ethan's downfall. It was my voice, reclaimed and amplified. Later that evening, at the networking mixer, I spotted him across the room. He looked smaller than I remembered, standing near the bar, avoiding eye contact. At one point, he walked over, tentative, hesitant. "Lena," he said quietly. "That was an incredible talk." I smiled politely. "Thank you." He looked like he wanted to say more, but the weight of everything unsaid hung between us. I didn't offer him an out. "You're doing great things," he finally said. "I'm happy for you. For once, I believed he meant it. But it didn't matter. I didn't need his validation. You should be, I replied gently. Because I am. Then I turned away to greet another guest, and that was that. The last conversation we'd ever have. When I got home to Seattle, Jordan was waiting at the office with takeout and champagne. To new beginnings, he said, clinking his glass against mine. We laughed about the irony of life, how it always circles back, giving you chances to choose who you've become. I told him about the conference, about Ethan's awkward attempt at conversation. Jordan grinned. You know what the best part is? You didn't even have to destroy him. He just watched you rise.
He was right.
There's a kind of revenge that doesn't come from payback. It comes from becoming untouchable. Ethan didn't lose because I wanted him to fail. He lost because I stopped caring whether he did. Months passed. Work flourished. My firm won 2 awards for sustainable design, and I started mentoring younger architects, especially women who'd faced toxic workplaces or gaslighting colleagues. I saw pieces of myself in them. The uncertainty, the desire to be believed, the fear of speaking up. One of them, a young intern named Mia, once asked me, "How do you move past people who lie about you?" I smiled and said, "You don't move past them. You outgrow the version of yourself that needed their approval." One late autumn afternoon, I visited Green River again. The finished complex stood tall and serene, sunlight glinting off its curved glass panels, trees blooming on the rooftop garden. It was everything I'd dreamed of. Open, sustainable, alive. I walked along the pathway, remembering every sleepless night, every doubt, every tear. Now those memories felt like distant echoes, reminders of the fire I walked through to become who I was. Standing there, watching families and children playing in the courtyard, I realized something simple but profound. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "You made it." That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine and my journal, a habit I'd picked up again. I wrote one line before closing it. He called me unstable. The truth is, I was rebuilding stability he could never touch. The city lights below shimmered like a reflection of everything I'd gained. Not revenge, not validation, just peace. And in that peace, I found something I'd been missing all along, myself. The first real snow of the season blanketed Seattle the morning I got the call that would change everything. I was at the office early, wrapped in a thick scarf, nursing my first coffee when my assistant knocked on the door. "Lena, there's someone from Architectural Digest on the line." I blinked. "The Architectural Digest?"
She grinned. "Yep."
They said it's about a feature on influential women shaping modern urban design. For a second, I thought it was a prank. But when I picked up the phone and heard the warm, enthusiastic voice on the other end, everything suddenly felt surreal. "Hi, Lena. We've been following your work on the Green River Complex and your talk at the LA conference," the editor said. "Your story resonates with a lot of young professionals. We'd love to do a cover feature. Your journey, your philosophy, and your work." I just sat there, smiling so wide it hurt. When I hung up, Jordan poked his head through the door. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," I said, laughing. "They want me on the cover." He let out a low whistle. "Well, look at you. From Blacklisted to Architectural Digest. I should start calling you Boss Lady of Redemption." I threw a paperclip at him. "Don't push it." But later that night, sitting in my apartment, it hit me. This wasn't luck. It was the payoff of every painful decision I'd made since walking away from the person who tried to ruin me. The interview was scheduled for early February. They sent a photographer from New York, a woman named Harper, soft-spoken but sharp-eyed, the kind of person who could make anyone look like a masterpiece. As she set up her camera in my studio, she asked gently, "If it's not too personal, how did you start over after someone tried to take your reputation?" I thought for a long time before answering. I stopped fighting for the version of the truth that everyone else believed. I said finally, "I just started living like the truth would catch up on its own." She smiled. "It did. That's power." The photo shoot was long but effortless. We shot among sketches, plants, models, sunlight. everything that represented rebirth. When the issue finally came out, the headline read, "From Broken Trust to Bold Design, How Lena Collins Redefined Resilience." The article went viral. People began sharing it online with captions like, "This is what grace under fire looks like." One comment stood out. It read, "I used to work under Ethan Marshall. Everything she says checks out. I'm glad she got her justice." I didn't respond, but I felt that old ache in my chest flicker, not pain anymore, just memory. By spring, I was getting invitations from universities, design schools, even corporate leadership events. People wanted to hear how I'd rebuilt not just my career, but my confidence. One day after a lecture at the University of Washington, a young woman approached me, her voice trembling. "I went through something similar," she said. "My boss said I was too emotional to handle projects. It destroyed me for a while. But seeing you, hearing your story, it gave me hope." I squeezed her hand. "You don't have to be emotionless to be strong. You just have to survive long enough for your story to change." Walking out of that hall, I realized what my purpose had become. The revenge was done. The healing had taken root. Now it was about legacy. That summer, I got a call from a nonprofit organization called Women Build Forward. They were launching an initiative to support women architects who'd been silenced, harassed, or blacklisted in their early careers. They wanted me to be a co-founder. I didn't even hesitate. We started small workshops, mentorship circles, funding small design projects. But soon, companies began donating, universities offered scholarships, and within a year, Women Build Forward had grown into a national movement. We even got coverage from CNN Business. Former architect overcomes smear campaign. Now she's helping others rise from professional betrayal. The irony was never lost on me. Every lie that was meant to destroy me had become a brick in the foundation of something unbreakable. One evening, after a long board meeting, Jordan and I went for dinner by the pier. The sunset painted the sky in streaks of gold and coral. He raised his glass. "To poetic justice, and to you, Lena, for turning pain into a damn blueprint." I smiled. "To resilience. And maybe a little revenge." He laughed. "You still think about him sometimes, don't you?" I hesitated, then nodded. Not in anger anymore. Just curiosity. I wonder if he ever really understood what he did. Jordan leaned back. "Doesn't matter.
You did.
That's why you're here, and he shrugged. Wherever he is." As if summoned by fate's irony, I found out exactly where he was a few weeks later. A client from New York flew in to discuss a new project. Over lunch, he casually mentioned, "I almost worked with this guy a while back, Ethan Marshall, I think. Total disaster. Got caught falsifying invoices or something. Shame, he had potential." I froze for a second. "Oh,
Yeah.
he's consulting independently now, I think. Lost a lot of clients." The client didn't notice the flicker of emotion that crossed my face, but Jordan did. He glanced at me, as if asking silently, "You okay?" I nodded. "I am," I said quietly. And I meant it, because for once, hearing about his downfall didn't thrill me. It didn't hurt me either. It just was. Like a chapter in a book you've already finished reading. By autumn, my life had taken on a rhythm, steady, creative, fulfilling. I started spending weekends hiking, painting again, even dating casually. Then came someone unexpected, Eli. He was an environmental engineer we'd collaborated with on a coastal restoration project. He was kind, funny, patient, everything Ethan wasn't. The first time he asked me out, I almost said no. Trust had become a foreign language. But he didn't push. He just smiled and said, "It's okay. We can just grab coffee and talk about bad clients instead." Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekend drives. He never tried to fix me, never made me feel like I had to prove my worth. And that, somehow, was the most healing thing of all. One night, sitting on my balcony with him, I told him everything, the rumors, the heartbreak, the redemption. He listened without judgment. When I finished, he took my hand and said softly, "What he did says everything about him. What you did after says everything about you." I didn't cry, but something inside me finally unclenched. For the first time, I felt like I could love again. Not because I'd forgotten the pain, but because I'd outgrown it. A few months later, Women Build Forward hosted its first national conference in San Francisco. I stood on stage before hundreds of women, journalists, and industry leaders, looking out at a crowd filled with stories like mine. This movement isn't about revenge, I said. It's about rewriting the narrative. About saying, you can't erase us with lies. Because integrity doesn't just survive, it evolves. As the applause rolled through the hall, I caught Jordan's proud grin in the front row, Eli's gentle nod beside him. And in that moment, I realized something profound. My story had started with betrayal, but it no longer belonged to pain. It belonged to purpose. Later that night, after the event, Eli and I walked by the pier lights. The air was cool, the ocean restless. He wrapped his arm around me and said, "You know, there's something poetic about all this." "What's that?" I asked. "You built a whole legacy from a lie someone told about you." I smiled, gazing out at the water. Maybe that's what architects do best. We build beauty from brokenness. He kissed my temple softly. And you, Lena Collins, built an empire from the ashes. When I think back to that day in the cafe, the one where Ethan's new boss asked for my reference letter, I can't help but marvel at the symmetry of life. It was as if the universe, after watching me crumble, had quietly started rearranging the pieces in my favor. What Ethan had once used to destroy me had become the very thing that exposed him. I didn't need to plot revenge. Life had been doing it on my behalf all along. But that didn't mean it was easy to watch. 2 weeks after Ethan's HR scandal broke, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Ethan, Lena, I know you probably hate me, but I need to explain." I stared at the message for a long moment, my thumb hovering over delete. A few months earlier, that text would have sent me spiraling, heart racing, hands trembling, desperate for answers.
But now
I just felt steady. Still, a small part of me was curious. Closure wasn't something I expected, but maybe it was time to face him. Me. "I'll meet you tomorrow. 1 hour. That's all." We met at a quiet park downtown, the kind with benches overlooking a small pond and trees shedding the last of their golden leaves. He looked older, not in years but in weight, like life had been sitting heavy on his shoulders. "Thanks for coming," he said softly. I nodded, saying nothing. The wind carried the faint scent of damp earth and coffee. "I lost everything, Lena," he continued, voice cracking slightly. "The company suspended me. My reputation's trashed. I can't even get interviews." I wanted to feel sorry for him, and maybe a small part of me did. But mostly, I felt a quiet kind of satisfaction, not from his pain, but from finally seeing the truth uncovered. "You lied," I said, my tone calm, almost detached. "You told people I was unstable, that I ruined your career. And now you want me to what? Feel bad for you?" His eyes darted away. "It wasn't supposed to go that far. I panicked when you left. I thought if I made you look bad, I'd look better." I let that sink in. The simplicity of his confession, selfishness wrapped in cowardice. "Ethan," I said finally, you didn't just make me look bad. You broke me. You made me question my mind, my worth, my sanity. And for what? To feed your ego." He looked up, guilt heavy in his eyes. "I know. I'm sorry. But apologies, I'd learned, don't erase damage. They just acknowledge it." "I don't hate you," I said, surprising even myself. "I used to, but not anymore. You don't deserve that space in me." His mouth opened slightly, like he wanted to argue, but I stood up before he could. "I hope you figure yourself out," I said. "But I'm done cleaning up after you." And with that, I walked away. That night, as I sat in my apartment with a mug of tea and soft jazz humming through the speakers, I felt something shift, not a dramatic movie-style revelation, but a quiet unburdening. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about letting him off the hook. It was about letting myself breathe again. A few months later, my firm launched a major project, a partnership with a national housing nonprofit. Jordan insisted I take the lead. "Lena, This is your baby, he said, sliding the files across my desk. You've earned this. I smiled, heartful. The project was close to home, literally. We were designing affordable housing in the same part of the city where I'd grown up. During one site visit, a woman approached me. Her name was Karen, a single mom raising 2 kids in a cramped apartment. She told me how much this project meant to her. You have no idea, she said, gripping my hand. People like you give us hope. For a moment, my throat tightened. People like me. A year ago, I was the woman everyone whispered about, the one branded unstable, unfit, unwanted. Now, I was standing in the middle of a construction site, hard hat on, blueprint in hand, building homes, building futures. It was during that project that the final piece of poetic justice unfolded. One afternoon, I got a call from a hiring manager at a design consultancy. Hi, Lena, she said warmly. We're vetting a candidate who listed you as a past collaborator, Ethan Ross. Mind sharing your experience working with him? I paused. My instinct wasn't anger anymore. Just clarity. I'd be happy to, I said. I told her the truth, that he was talented but prone to manipulation, that he often took credit for others' work, that I wouldn't recommend him for a leadership position. No embellishment. No revenge. Just facts. The manager thanked me. A week later, word got around that Ethan didn't get the job. Jordan joked about it later. Guess karma has a good sense of timing. I smiled. Karma always knows the schedule. Months rolled into a year. Life began to bloom again, not the same as before, but stronger, quieter, more intentional. I started teaching part-time at a local design college, mentoring young architects. Every time I saw one of my students struggle with confidence or self-doubt, I saw a bit of my younger self, desperate for validation from the wrong people. One afternoon, a student named Emily stayed after class. Miss Thompson, she said nervously, can I ask you something? How do you keep believing in yourself when people try to break you down? I smiled, remembering all those nights crying on my apartment floor, wondering if I was the problem. You don't wait for them to stop, I said. You learn to hear your own voice louder than theirs. She nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. After she left, I sat at my desk, staring at the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. And I realized that was it. That was my victory. Not revenge. Not vindication. Resilience. The night of our project's grand opening, the city's skyline shimmered like a promise. The mayor gave a speech, Jordan raised a toast, and cameras flashed as families walked through their new homes for the first time. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the crowd, hundreds of faces, each carrying their own story of pain and perseverance. I used to think strength meant never breaking, I said into the microphone. But I've learned that strength is breaking, and then rebuilding yourself with the pieces that mattered most. The crowd clapped. Some people cried. And as I stepped down from the stage, a little girl ran up to me. She couldn't have been more than 8, holding her mom's hand. Are you the lady who made the houses? She asked shyly. I knelt down and smiled. I helped ya.
She grinned.
I want to be like you when I grow up. And right there, that was the moment every scar, every sleepless night, every tear found its purpose. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a short note. I'm leaving town. I wanted to thank you for meeting me that day. You were right. I need to fix myself. I'm sorry again. I folded it quietly, set it in my desk drawer, and never looked at it again. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the girl I used to be, the one crying in her car, the one believing she was broken because someone told her so. I wish I could reach back through time, hold her hand and whisper, "You're not crazy. You're just in the wrong story." Now, I know better. I rewrote the story. And in my version, the woman doesn't stay silenced. She doesn't live in the shadows of someone else's lies. She rebuilds. She thrives. She turns her pain into something that stands tall, brick by brick, line by line. When people ask me about Ethan now, I don't talk about betrayal or revenge. I talk about alignment, how truth has a way of finding its light, even if it takes time. Because in the end, The sweetest revenge isn't destruction. It's success so radiant, so undeniable, that it silences every rumor, every doubt, every whispered lie. And if Ethan ever stumbles across one of the articles about the community project, if he ever sees my face on the news, standing beside families whose lives we changed, I hope he understands that he didn't destroy me. He refined me. I sip my coffee on the balcony of my apartment, overlooking the city lights, and smile to myself. The air smells like rain and freedom. I think of all the times I begged the universe to give me justice, and now I realize justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just peace. And peace, after everything, is the most powerful revenge of all.